Hello, hello. My name is Sandra. Welcome to my channel. Today I am super excited to talk about a book that I have been anticipating for a little while now. It is a debut work by Daniel Greene. If you've been living under a rock or you're new to the booktube community, Daniel is one of the most influential booktubers out there. He has recently crossed over from being a reader and fanboy into the realm of authorhood. I do not envy Daniel in the sense that making the leap from critic to author, he is going to be subjected to heavier criticism in anything that he does or says or writes. Godspeed, Daniel. When he announced he was releasing Breach of Peace, I got super excited. Breach of Peace is the first in a trilogy of novellas before he jumps into full-length novel work in this world that he has created. Just as a quick disclaimer, I do not know Daniel whatsoever. I have never interacted with Daniel. I've been avoiding all Breach of Peace video reviews, Goodreads reviews. I am trying to come at this as unbiased as possible without any outside influence into my opinion towards Breach of Peace. With that said, let's talk about Breach of Peace without talking about Breach of Peace. To start, I am one of those people that avoids reading the back cover information on any book before I dive into it. Like I said, I avoid anything that's going to give major plot points away, and back covers tend to do that. I would like to avoid talking about the back cover information and what is happening, even though that stuff happens right from the get-go at the very beginning of the book, just so that if you know nothing about it, you can be completely blind about it too. I was pleasantly surprised by the world building. I anticipated Daniel's book to be more of the traditional fantasy type of story, but it was more of like a grim urban fantasy maybe. But then they also traveled in carriages. One of the things I like to do when I'm trying to describe a book's tone and feel is sometimes liken it to a video game or a movie or a song. As I was reading Breach of Peace, I definitely got From Hell vibes, or if you're familiar with crime movies like Bone Collector or Seven, just these really graphic, violent murder scenes that are just gruesome. And then From Hell, there's just this wardrobe and the time setting of that particular Jack the Ripper story. I definitely got those vibes when I was reading Breach of Peace. Also kind of Altered Carbon Season 1, just because in the world that Daniel has created, there's this huge divide between the wealthy upper class, imperial class, and then everybody else. That was very apparent in the Altered Carbon books. So I got flashes of that while I was reading Breach of Peace, along with, like I said, Bone Collector, Seven, just the whole suspenseful thriller, stomach-turning crime scenes. I was actually trying to describe some of this to my partner. When I was describing certain scenes in the book and certain themes, he goes, "Oh, you know, that kind of sounds like Equilibrium starring Christian Bale." And I was like, yeah, you're right. So there were so many different parts of the book while I was reading it. I got flashes of all of these different movies, so it has like this very violent, dark, suspenseful feel to it. It was hard for me to categorize what genre this book would fall into exactly, because it's not exactly urban fantasy, it's not exactly a whodunit, it has a bit of crime fiction in it, it has a bit of horror for sure, it has suspense, it's a thriller, there's a lot of pump action, adrenaline, which was done extremely well. So yeah, if you're into that sort of thing, which I am, I think that you would really enjoy this book. As far as Daniel's writing style goes, it is not flowery whatsoever. He doesn't go into big, long exposition when describing the world or the setting or anything like that. You get glimpses of all those things through little reveals as, you know, dialogue unfolds, or from transitioning from scene to scene. He doesn't just info dump on you. So I do like that. I'm really intrigued to see where the second novella is going to take us, because I am very fascinated by this world and the power structures that have been built within it. He writes in a way that doesn't get in the way of the storytelling. One of my biggest pet peeves is when I'm trying to read something and there's so many modifiers and adjectives and that sort of thing that it takes me out of the story, and I'm like focused more on trying to read the phrasing of the book rather than just being fully immersed in the story. And Daniel's writing simplistic, straightforward, no nonsense, and visceral, so I loved it. One of the most important things to me when it comes to enjoying a series is the cast of characters. This was probably the weakest part of the novella, in my opinion. The protagonist, Khlid, she is likable enough. She is very independent, strong. She's sharp. She's not afraid to make hard decisions and to accept the responsibility for, you know, her actions. She is very strong in that sense. There's another character named Samuel who's also an inspector, and he happens to be Khlid's husband. For me, I wanted to see more into the relationship between Khlid and Sam so that I could get more attached to them. Chapman I really enjoyed just because he seemed like such a mysterious character, but he was also this very brilliant, socially inappropriate kind of personality. You definitely see the Sherlock Holmes influence there, which I love. I would say every character in this book was morally gray, and I think that's just the world that these characters live in. I really wanted to know more about this character named Christi. I was just so fascinated by her. She seemed like such a strong character to me. Breach of Peace is a novella, but I wanted a little bit more development and a little bit more opportunity to get more attached to each of the characters in the story. Next was the world building. I think the world building was done extremely well. I hate info dumps, and I just think that how the world was revealed piece by piece in dialogue and transitioning from scene to scene, that was perfectly done. Daniel gave you just enough to kind of sit back and wonder about different pieces of information that you received. He definitely has my attention on this world, and I will be continuing to read these books to see how this thing, if it's supposed to be a prequel trilogy to the main series that he's writing, then I'm all for it. Plot was probably the second weakest thing to me after characters. There were major reveals throughout the book that they were easier to predict than I would have thought that they would be, but they were still fascinating enough that while I was reading, I could not put the book down. The pacing was sharp, the dialogue was sharp. As each of these plot points unfolded, I did not want to put the book down. I think there were like 8 chapters, and the way they were divided into almost like little mini scenes or stories, I loved how the book was structured, and it just kept me flipping through the pages. After character, theme is probably the next big thing that I can geek out over when I'm reading books. And this one, I mentioned, I got flashes of like Altered Carbon with this huge disparity between the wealthy upper class and everybody else. In this world, there are sex houses, which are completely legal. The power structure for local police is very interesting. It's totally acceptable for them to use force to resolve problems. It was just a very intriguing thing. So you definitely sense those kinds of themes in this. As the book goes along, you see that this is turning into an enormous conspiracy type of story. There's some pretty horrible things going on, and so that's when it starts turning almost science fiction fantasy to me. I was down with it. By far, I think one of the most intriguing aspects of this world was the fact that you have this almighty entity that is the end-all be-all for dictating what's morally accepted in this particular society. Characters are morally gray. Without pushing back, they answer to this almighty. They do his bidding, and his word is the last word, and that's it. But Breach of Peace starts getting really interesting is when I started getting these 1984 vibes. And I don't mean in a surveillance kind of way, but in 1984, if you've read that book, you know that the protagonist works in I think it's the Ministry of Truth, if I'm remembering correctly. And he's just kind of this cog in a wheel. He is unlike the rest of his co-workers in that he senses something very, very wrong with everything that's happening and the work that he is doing. The very last scene of Breach of Peace hit me so hard in feeling like channeling that 1984 vibe, and I loved every second of it. In saying all of that, yes, the book is violent. I was hooked from the very first sentence, the imagery that was in that sentence, until the very last sentence of the novella. It captured my whole attention with how violent this particular society is. There were still moments in dialogue that were very humorous. There's one kind of joke with Chapman and Smits that I particularly loved. I thought the character work was really, really good, and I wanted more of it. So I am going to end this by saying, if this is Daniel's first stab at a published work, then I am pumped to see where the rest of this series goes, because as far as debut works goes, this one was a solid one. I am glad that I pre-ordered this book, and you can bet that I'm going to be pre-ordering the rest of the books. If in X number of years he decides to release a special edition for the trilogy, I would love to see like an illustrated omnibus edition for these novellas because I just think something artistic and visual would be amazing to have with this particular book. I hope you enjoyed my thoughts on Breach of Peace by Daniel Greene. I'm super excited for this. Daniel, best of luck on your book birthday on the 30th. Can't wait to pick up the next one. All right, thanks for watching, everyone. Bye.